My name is Danny, and today I'm going to be today I'm going to show you how to make art with programming. So, of course, in your life you may have utilized art before. Maybe when you were a kid, you maybe did some finger painting in class. That was always a good time. Maybe even to sketching at some cartoons on a notebook, or maybe even sculpting something using your hands. That would be really cool. There's lots of different art out there, lots of different forms, but today specifically I'm going to be showing you how to make art with programming. Specifically today we're going to be utilizing the P5JS library. So let's navigate over there. Let's get started. So I just said P5JS library. What does that mean? So today we're going to be programming in the language JavaScript, which we are going to use in conjunction. Is that the word? We're going to be using it with the P5JS library. So there's coding, there's JavaScript. It's words you type out, instructions for the computer, and P5JS is essentially a bunch of code, a library that we have in addition to our code that we get to actually take properties, functions from this library and use it to essentially make art on the page. So it's really fun. So let's check out here. It says hello. This is a JavaScript library. This is actually based on another programming library called Processing, based in the programming language of Java, which you may have heard of. So yeah, it's really cool. You can make a lot of really cool stuff here. The website is really good in terms of teaching you how to utilize the library. So, and again, just in case if you don't know JavaScript yet, go ahead and learn that somehow first, and then maybe come back to this. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff you can learn here. There's home, editor, and you can actually make art inside of the website as well, which is really neat. You can go to the editor here. If you click this, editor P5JS, and so this preview area is already where you can go ahead and make some art. And yeah, so I guess maybe this would be a good place to start. Actually, before I go here, you probably want to go ahead and read through this. So make your first sketch here, the getting started page. So they tell you how to actually go step by step. But in this case, I'll kind of go ahead and speed up ahead and kind of just talk about it. So let's go back to the editor. So here's the editor. And you can go ahead and write code and essentially put it on this preview page here, which is really neat. So let's go ahead and get started. So there's these two functions that you may see here. There's one called setup and there's one called draw. So these are very important when it comes to utilizing the P5JS library. So you must call these inside of your sketch in order to see anything on the page. If you miss draw or setup, there might be an error. So make sure that you call both of those. Create canvas is also really important. So imagine you are working on your piece of art somewhere, and if you don't have a canvas essentially to work on, then you can't draw anywhere, right? So you have to use this create canvas function, and it takes in two parameters. It takes in, I believe this is the width, and this is going to be the height. And by default, I believe that this is going to be set based on the window. So this size of this preview is technically a 400 by 400 essentially canvas for you to draw on. And this background right here. So again, you have to call this in order to inside of the setup function as well. And next we have our draw function. So this draw function is being called essentially a bunch of times each second. So if you ever heard of the name frame rate or frames per second FPS, essentially this is happening every single second, this draw function. And it is doing this background function, which is essentially that, there is a canvas and maybe our canvas is the color white, it could be the color black, it could be any of these colors. So in this case, when you pass in 220, this is specifically referring to a color in luminosity. So if you only put in one number, this is referring to either light or dark. So 220 is a pretty bright number. It goes from 0 to 255. So if you want a dark color, you want to use 0. If you run this, it should be, so you can see here it's actually a black canvas now. And when you, so yeah, now it's a black canvas. So how do we draw anything on this page here? Well, again, what I would suggest you do is go to the reference. So if I open another page here, and let me actually allow all. So if you go to the reference, so P5JS reference here, let's check that out. And there's lots of stuff here, maybe kind of overwhelming, but really what we want to look at for now is let's just make a square on the page. Maybe that'll be the easiest thing for us to do. So in this case, we can utilize the rect function, and it's really nice because it gives you a reference on how you should use it. So it even tells you like, oh, you can make this is how you make a regular rectangle. This is a rectangle with a radius, so like a little curved. This one has only one side curved, so it's really nice. So you could even copy this if you want, because in this case we're just learning how to use it. But just so you know, this is the location X and Y, and this is the height. No, this is the width, and then this is the height here. So let's go ahead and put that on the page. So I'm going to say, okay, computer, go ahead and draw a rectangle somewhere on the page. I'm going to press play, and now look at that. So now in the X position of 30, Y position of 20, we made a 55 by 55 rectangle on our canvas here. So that's really fun. But really, like, we can do this, and this is nice. And we could also do this just, scribbling on the page here. But in a way, programming art is not only just static art, but you can also kind of translate this into a moving art that follows a sort of algorithm, which is really a set of instructions instructing this rectangle what to do. So let's try something here. Maybe so we have our Y position here, right? So Y, there's if we're going back to math here from high school, elementary school, whatever. You have your X. So X plane, you could imagine it kind of just a line, a horizontal line like this. Y is going to be up and down. And in this case, let's see if we can move this rectangle in the program up and down. So let's try that here. So I'm going to make something here called let Y pose, and I'm going to set that equal to 0 for now. And let's see if I go ahead and do this, and if I run this, oh, look at that. So this moved up a little higher, and if I set this to 100, we'll see that it moves a little lower. So in general, when it comes to building any sort of interface or just a canvas with websites and programming, we generally use negative numbers to refer to going up the page and positive numbers going down the page. So it's a little not backwards, but a little different from, again, regular geometry that we learned in class. So there's X, and then positive Y goes down actually in this case. So yeah, so let's start at 0, and let's say I want to move this box down the page. What I can do is inside of here I can say Y pose is equal to, and I'll just for my convention just know that if you do plus equals, you're actually increasing this Y value here. So Y pose equal to 1. So what did I do here? I have this my variable Y pose, and I'm increasing. So every time I call this draw function, I'm essentially increasing its value by 1. So let's run this again. So if I run this, oh, look at that. We can see here that as we run this sketch, this draw function is being called a bunch of times a second, or we can even set it if we want to. You can say frame rate here, and this will set the frame rate of your sketch. So you can say 60, you can say 2, and you'll see that it's running really slowly now. So each time you see it moving, that is essentially the draw function being called. So yep, that's how you can use the editor here. But let me show you what you can create. So this is a very simple example, but let me show you some examples that you can utilize to go ahead and create more items on the page. So some projects that I made in the past here, I'll show you. So for instance, one of my favorite ones that I have here, you can see I have my scripts, and there's a lot of code here. So maybe try not to be, no need to worry. This is just, it comes with anyone, like with making any art. It's really up to you how you decide to interpret it and how to make it on the page. So in my case, I decided to say, hey, I want to make a bunch of lines on the page and see what happens when I do that. So I have this, again, I still have my setup and I still have my draw function, but in this case, of course, I have a bunch of code that I'm doing here in addition to that. And I'm gonna go to here. And I personally really like using P5JS with a code editor rather than using the editor on their website. I would highly recommend utilizing VS Code. Oh, sorry. I would highly recommend using VS Code so you can start typing the code away here. And in addition to that, you can actually run a live server. So you can run this in essentially the browser here. So I'm going to open in live server. And again, you can find this extension here. I downloaded it. It's called live server. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to open with live server. And you can see this is just something I made. This is a sketch. It's very, very random. So this is essentially a bunch of lines kind of in this 2D space here, and I could reload the page each time, and you'll see it's a little different. In addition to that, I have some variables here that you can change over time. So maybe you want random lengths. I'm like, okay, I'll set that to true. And if I run this, now you can see that maybe this is more like an abstract piece of art, I would say, if I want to call this art. But this is just me having a good time, just kind of goofing around and seeing what I can make out of this. So in this case, again, with the P5 library, there are methods and properties for you to utilize to make this kind of art. What if I decided that I wanted to make it a looping one? So in my case, I kind of set this to be, it might look a little weird, but you can see it's happening over time. It tends to do this kind of thing here. So it's calling the algorithm, the draw function, and each time it calls the draw function, it runs all of my code, and this is the result of all of that. Hopefully this isn't too disorienting, but I'm going to make it a little faster. Maybe in this case I'll say increment is 3 and timing function is 1. And it might run a little faster in this case here, so slightly faster. But yeah, this is kind of interesting to me at least. That's one piece of art that you can try to make. Another one that I can show here that, let's see, you can also work with some 3D, a form of 3D art as well. So in this case here, I have a box kind of moving back and forth in the X, Y, and also the Z axis. So again, that's the third plane of the third dimension essentially. So X, Y, and then Z. Like, if you ever see a 3D movie, things are kind of like going towards you. It's more like real, I suppose, in this case. So here's another way they can utilize it. And again, P5JS has a library they can utilize to make this sort of thing. Let's go back here. Let's open one, just a couple more, just to kind of give you an idea of what you can create with P5JS. In this case, I made this bubble function that creates a bunch of bubbles on the page, and it kind of has them going up, and the smaller ones kind of zoom up a little faster. The bigger ones are slowly but surely going up the page. So again, they're all kind of like screensavers, I suppose you can say, but in a way, this is like a way for you to program. And if this is how you have fun programming, if this is what gets you to program, then it's a lot of fun. Let's show a couple more here. Maybe just one more. Here's a really fun one. Some flow fields they can utilize. So essentially, this is using some sort of field algorithm. So essentially, there's a grid on the page and each point of the grid there, it's pointing in a certain direction. And based on that direction, each of these points are actually moving towards that direction. In this case, I actually implemented it mostly correctly. There's a little bit of bugs in this case, but as you can see, it's kind of moving like a liquid. This is kind of the idea. It's called a flow field. This is kind of the idea of how you would simulate the flow of liquids, for instance. And lastly, my favorite one personally is, let me go to it here, I believe it is fractals. Yeah, so this is what I made recently. It's very abstract, I would say, but essentially I made this grid, and I told this grid, hey, pick one point on the page, and then from there select 2 other points, and then connect them all together. So essentially it's making a bunch of triangles or lines on the page, but also utilizing some lines on the page. What else is it? And it's kind of randomly going across the page, but it kind of produces these like weird kind of abstract images that I find pleasing personally. And again, you can use this using the P5JS library, which is super cool. Hello, back again. So yep, that was pretty much how you can utilize the P5JS library. And again, all of the code that I just showed you in my repository, it's going to be in the link in the description below on GitHub, so you can feel free to clone this, try it out yourself. It's really fun. Before I end the video, I would highly recommend looking into the YouTube channel Coding Train. I'll try to put it in the description somewhere above me or something, in the annotation. So essentially, the Coding Train is a YouTube channel dedicated to using the P5JS library, or just processing, or just making a lot of coding art. And that's how I learned how to utilize the P5JS library. So I would highly recommend you go over there if you want to learn more about this. A lot more in-depth tutorials and a lot of fun stuff over there. So yep, that's it for this video. Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.